a lot he gets wrong.
He could be traded in the offseason. I think their ambivalence toward him has been fueled in part by the coverage that he brings. It's almost like a Tebow mania light. It's one of the reasons why Tim Tebow couldn't find a home in the NFL after Tebow mania took the league by storm. Teams don't want those extra voices and forces and factors unrelated to talent and ability influencing decisions as to who should play and who shouldn't play. And I think that's been, even though Shedeur Sanders didn't really create that deliberately, that's part of the thing that makes him potentially unattractive.
So before we get to
NFL insider Mike Florio just went viral after leaking that Shedeur Sanders could be traded in the offseason because the Browns' ambivalence toward him has been fueled in part by the coverage that he brings, essentially claiming that teams view Shedeur's fan support as Tebow mania light, and that the Browns don't want extra voices and forces and factors unrelated to talent and ability influencing decisions as to who should play and who shouldn't play. But here's where this gets absolutely explosive. Cleveland sports radio destroyed Florio's comparison between Shadur and Tim Tebow, saying, "I'm over this Tim Tebow comparison. The guy couldn't throw a freaking football." And "I've seen more from Shadur in 4 starts than I did in 2 years as Denver starter for Tim Tebow," exposing that Florio is making a lazy comparison that ignores the massive difference in actual talent. The most damning part? The hosts revealed that Kevin Stefanski has not buckled under any pressure of the Shedeur Sanders fanbase at all, and that Dillon Gabriel got concussed. What are we talking about? There was no fan pressure that they caved to, proving that Florio's entire premise about the Browns being influenced by supporters is completely false. In the real bombshell, one host admitted if an organization can't handle a groundswell of support for one player and still make objective decisions, then you should fire each and every one of them anyways, and then dropped this nuclear statement: "The one thing I've given Stefanski credit for is he has remained staunch in his belief that Dillon Gabriel was better than Shedeur Sanders," meaning the Browns organization has never been influenced by fans, making Florio's trade speculation nothing more than a lazy hot take designed to get attention 3 months before claiming, "I knew it," regardless of what actually happens. Look, y'all need to understand what just happened because Mike Florio, one of the biggest NFL insiders in the media, just went on the air and dropped a bombshell about Shedeur Sanders potentially being traded in the offseason, and Cleveland sports radio immediately called him out for it. Let me walk you through this entire situation because there are layers to this story, and by the end of it, you're going to see why Florio's take is not only lazy, but it's also wrong on multiple levels. So Mike Florio goes on Cleveland sports radio, and he starts talking about Shedeur Sanders' future with the Browns. And here's what he says: "He could be traded in the offseason. I think their ambivalence toward him has been fueled in part by the coverage that he brings. It's almost like Tebow mania light. It's one of the reasons why Tim Tebow couldn't find a home in the NFL after Tebow mania took the league by storm. Teams don't want those extra voices and forces and factors unrelated to talent and ability influencing decisions as to who should play and who shouldn't play." Now, one of the Cleveland radio hosts immediately responds, and his response is perfect. Before we get to the part that I think he gets right, even when he gets it wrong, "I'm over this Tim Tebow comparison. I watched Tim Tebow play for multiple years in the NFL. The guy couldn't throw a freaking football. The guy couldn't throw a freaking football." Y'all, that's the key point that destroys Florio's entire argument. Tim Tebow and Shedeur Sanders are not comparable as NFL quarterbacks, not even close.
Tim Tebow comparison. I watched Tim Tebow play for multiple years in the NFL. The guy couldn't throw a freaking football.
Yeah.
There was not like, oh, he moves really well. He was a tight end. And he honestly, his own ego got in the way of him being a successful NFL player because he had no business being an NFL quarterback. I've seen more from Shadur is it 4 starts? 4 starts than I did in 2 years as Denver starter for Tim Tebow.
I don't remember a throw that Tebow had that comes close to, even in a bad game that he played against the Bears, any of the 2 that he threw to Isaiah Bond. I just don't remember any of that. Even the Jerry Jeudy throw, I don't remember any of those throws happening for Tim Tebow.
And I think that is my frustration when, he gets compared to Johnny Manziel, when he gets compared to Tim Tebow. I was like, guys, no one would have given a rat's butt.
The host continues, I've seen more from Shadur in 4 starts than I did in 2 years as Denver starter for Tim Tebow. I don't remember a throw that Tebow had that comes close to even in a bad game that he played against the Bears. Any of the 2 that he threw to Isaiah Bond. I don't remember any of those throws happening for Tim Tebow. Even the Jerry Jeudy throw, I don't remember any of those throws happening. Let me repeat that. I've seen more from Shadur in 4 starts than I did in 2 years of Tim Tebow. That's damning. That's a complete destruction of the Tebow comparison. The host then makes this crucial point. I think this idea that we're still comparing Shadur to 2 guys who could not play football if their life depended on it in the NFL, that upsets me. Facts, because the Tebow comparison isn't just about the fan support or the media coverage, it's about conflating 2 completely different levels of talent. Tim Tebow was an option quarterback in college who had no business being an NFL quarterback. He couldn't read defenses, he couldn't throw with accuracy, he couldn't operate from the pocket. The only reason he got drafted in the first round was because of his college success at Florida. But Shedeur Sanders? Shadur has shown elite accuracy. He's shown the ability to make NFL-level throws. He's demonstrated pocket presence and decision-making. He threw 4 touchdowns against the Titans. He's thrown dimes to Isaiah Bond in tight coverage. The other host adds this perspective. Johnny Manziel was always a little interesting because Johnny could sling it in college, but Johnny had a very Dylan Gabriel thing to himself, where he could throw the ball, everyone knew that. He's just a little Oompa Loompa, and it was just never going to translate to the NFL. So even with Johnny Manziel, another comparison people make to Shadur, the issue was his size and his off-field problems, but people knew he could throw the ball. The first host responds, "That's what kills me about this. Diego Pavia was incredibly disrespectful on a lot of different fronts, and the thing they got on Shadur is he had a draft room. Do you see that? Can you imagine? He looked like a chotch because of his draft room. In 2025, a guy tried to brand himself? Oh, color me shocked." The host is pointing out the hypocrisy of how Shadur gets criticized. Diego Pavia went to a nightclub after the Heisman ceremony and said F Indiana and F all the voters. That's actually disrespectful behavior. But Shadur? He had a nice draft room set up to document his journey. He wore nice clothes. He tried to build his brand. And somehow he's the one who gets labeled as a problem. The host continues, meanwhile, everyone that shows up to the Heisman and all these NFL draft ceremonies have suits tailored to the nines. They have everything custom. They're wearing expensive watches. They do all these things. This is what everyone does. But with Shadur, it just became a problem for some reason. Exactly. The double standard is wild. Now, let's get to the part about Florio's trade speculation, because one of the hosts makes a crucial point. I think it's a hot take today to say he could be traded in the offseason, without knowing what's going to happen in the front office, without knowing what's going to happen with a head coach. To say that right now is what I think is textbook Mike Florio, which is coming up and saying something, so 3 months later you're going to be like, aha, I knew it. And then it's not going to happen, and then he'll still claim that he was on it first. Textbook Mike Florio. Y'all, this is how media insiders operate. They throw out speculative takes early so that if it happens, they can claim they were ahead of the story. And if it doesn't happen, they just move on to the next take and nobody remembers. The other host adds this perspective. I don't think it's out of the question that it does happen, but I just think it's asinine today before Andrew Berry or Stefanski gets fired. Exactly. How can you talk about trading Shadur when you don't even know who the coach is going to be? How can you talk about the Browns' long-term plans when the entire front office might get cleaned out? But then, one of the hosts makes a point that completely destroys Florio's argument about the fan pressure. Shadur's on a rookie deal. Part of the problem the Browns are in right now is that you're paying too much money, not only dead cap to a bunch of offensive linemen that aren't going to be here next year, but you're paying Deshaun Watson $45 million every year for the next 2 as well. The advantage that you have in Shadur, starter or backup, is he's costing you $900,000 a year. $900,000 a year. The host continues, I hate that that's the advantage, but that advantage supersedes anything that you would ever come up with about a circus or anything like that, because he is the best quarterback that you are going to get for that price by far. Facts. The Browns are paying Deshaun Watson $45 million per year to be on injured reserve, and they're considering trading a quarterback who's making less than $1 million and has shown he can actually play. That makes no sense from a financial standpoint. The host adds, also, what's the trade value on a 5th-round pick that started 7 games? You're going to give up your financial advantage for a 3rd or 4th rounder? You're going to throw that away for a 3rd or 4th rounder? It just seems silly to me. Exactly. What team is going to give up significant draft capital for Shadur when he's only started a handful of games? And even if they did, why would the Browns give up that financial flexibility for a mid-round pick? It doesn't make any sense.
One thing I've given him credit for is the idea that he has not buckled under any pressure of the Shedeur Sanders fan base at all. Like, he has remained staunch in his belief that Dillon Gabriel was better than Shedeur Sanders. And throughout this whole entire process, whether it's Andrew Berry, whether it's Kevin Stefanski, first off, they never buckled to the idea that they have to give him first team reps. That never happened. And then they never pushed him up the lineup in order to get him to start this season based off of fan pressure. Dillon Gabriel got concussed. Like, what are we talking about? He was 3rd out of the gate. There's no fan pressure that they caved to.
Yeah, and I also if you're caving to, if your organization cannot handle a groundswell of support for one player and still make objective decisions, then you should fire each and every one of them anyways.
For sure. If you're going to be that much of a bobblehead to the fan base, then what are you doing here? We could run Facebook polls all day long and decide how to run the team if that was the case.
I bet you Facebook polls would have more success for the Browns right now.
Now, here's where the hosts really destroy Florio's argument, because Florio's entire premise is that the Browns are worried about fan pressure influencing their decisions. But one of the hosts points out, where he got it right in the clip that we played is teams do not like fan clubs. They make the teams very nervous, because when things aren't going well, that fan club attacks. As we've seen, when people felt like the Browns have wronged Shadur, were Browns fans, were Shadur fan supporters all over the Browns social media? Were they all over everything, making us think about it? So yes, Shadur has a strong fan base. Yes, they've been vocal when they think the Browns are mistreating him. But then the host asks the ultimate question. Didn't you just tell, wouldn't an organization, if they're like, Shadur fans really want to see him play, I guess we have to, haven't you already lost the freaking plot? The other host responds, well, no, I think he's assuming that's happened with other teams. But in this version of the Browns, where have they ever been influenced? The one thing I've given Stefanski credit for, he's been very, very wrong in his assessment. But the one thing I've given him credit for is the idea that he has not buckled under any pressure of the Shedeur Sanders fan base at all. He has not buckled under any pressure at all. The host continues, he has remained staunch in his belief that Dillon Gabriel was better than Shedeur Sanders throughout this whole entire process. Whether it's Andrew Berry, whether it's Kevin Stefanski, they never buckled to the idea that they have to give him first-team reps. That never happened. And then they never pushed him up the lineup in order to get him to start this season based off of fan pressure. Dillon Gabriel got concussed. What are we talking about? He was 3rd out of the gate. There was no fan pressure that they caved to. Dillon Gabriel got concussed. Y'all, this is the most important point in this entire discussion. The Browns didn't make Shadur the starter because of fan pressure. They made him the starter because Dillon Gabriel got injured and Jameis Winston wasn't cutting it. The fan pressure had nothing to do with it. So Florio's entire argument that the Browns might trade Shadur because they don't want to deal with fan influence is based on a false premise, because the Browns have never been influenced by the fans when it comes to Shadur. The other host adds this perfect point. If your organization cannot handle a groundswell of support for one player and still make objective decisions, then you should fire each and every one of them anyways. For sure. If you're going to be that much of a bobblehead to the fan base, then what are you doing here? We could just run Facebook polls all day long and decide how to run the team if that was the case. We could just run Facebook polls. That's the ultimate truth. If an NFL organization is making roster decisions based on what fans want on social media, then that organization is incompetent and everyone should be fired. But the Browns haven't done that. They've stuck to their evaluations, even when those evaluations were wrong about Dylan Gabriel being better than Shadur. The host then makes this observation. I get it. Teams don't want fan clubs, but you have to have something that offsets that and something that balances out the idea that you do have this massive fan base and you are very valuable with your contract and you also have upside that exists in a spot that no one else on this roster currently offers. Exactly. Yes, Shadur has a strong fan base, but he also has elite accuracy, a rookie contract that costs less than $1 million per year, the ability to make NFL-level throws, and upside that no other quarterback on the roster has. Those factors outweigh any concerns about fan pressure. The host concludes, I've just watched people try and make a case for moving on from Shadur or that you have to make a decision quicker on Shadur because of the supporters. And I think it's just a convenient way of working around the real conversation here. A convenient way of working around the real conversation. That's what Florio is doing. He's using the fan base as a scapegoat instead of actually evaluating Shedur's talent and his value to the organization. So here's my question for you. When Mike Florio says Shadur could be traded in the offseason because of Tebow mania light, is that just a lazy hot take from someone who wants to claim he predicted it 3 months later regardless of what happens? When Cleveland hosts destroy the Tebow comparison by saying, I've seen more from Shadur in 4 starts than 2 years of Tim Tebow, and the guy couldn't throw a freaking football, doesn't that prove Florio is ignoring the massive talent difference? And when the hosts reveal Kevin Stefanski has not buckled under any pressure of the Shedeur Sanders fan base at all, and that Dylan Gabriel got concussed, what are we talking about? Doesn't that completely destroy Florio's premise that the Browns are influenced by fan support? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because Mike Florio just went viral for making a lazy comparison and speculation that ignores facts about Shedur's talent, his financial value, and the reality that the Browns have never caved to fan pressure when it comes to roster decisions. If you believe Shadur deserves to be evaluated on his talent, not compared to quarterbacks who couldn't play, and that trading him for a third-round pick would be the dumbest decision the Browns could make, smash that subscribe button, because we're going to keep exposing lazy media takes that ignore reality while pushing narratives designed to get clicks rather than speak truth.